Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our special program dedicated to Iran's retaliation on Israel's attacks on its embassy in Damascus a week ago. For more insights, we're having with us Mr. Hamoud Salhi, political analyst joining us from the U.S. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Hamoud Salhi. We do not have this guest for now. Arij Al-Koukash, however, a journalist and a political activist from Lebanon. Welcome and thank you for accepting our invite.
مساء الخير.
Thank you for being with us. Usma Azal, manager in Palestine broadcast, is joining us from Jenin, occupied Palestine. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much. And before starting our discussion with our panel of guests, let's watch this report that summarizes the situation by Marwa Belaiwar.
Following the Zionist attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus earlier this week, Iran's Revolutionary Guards announced on Saturday the seizure of a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz, which belongs to a Zionist businessman. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv vowed in a statement delivered by army spokesperson to respond to any Iranian attack following the incident. IRNA news agency reported that Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian criticized Western countries and the UN Security Council for not condemning the attack. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden warned against an imminent attack on Israel and advised Tehran to avoid taking such action.
And Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
U.S. intelligence sources, for their parts, indicate that Iran has prepared over 100 cruise missiles for a potential strike. The U.S. has deployed extra military resources in the region, including ships and aircrafts, and stationed 2 Navy destroyers in the east of the Mediterranean in preparation for any possible attack. The Middle East has been facing rising tensions over the past 6 months due to the Zionist aggression on Gaza. Fears are looming in the region from any escalation that leads to military clashes.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard said on Saturday it has launched dozens of drones and missiles against specific targets in Israel, according to the Iranian state media, to mark a widely anticipated reprisal attack. U.S. and British air defense systems in the Middle East have intercepted some Iranian drones, according to 2 U.S. officials. We have been seeing tensions in the Middle East region for a while now, with the war in Gaza, the Houthis in the Red Sea, Israeli attacks in Lebanon, and now it is spreading to Iran. Usama Nazal, can we talk about a regional escalation in here?
Yeah, of course. What's happening tonight is a clear indication of regional escalation as the Israeli occupation, the Zionist regime, breached the sovereignty of Syria and targeted the Iranian embassy or consulate, killing a number of the staff there, in addition to the war and the genocidal campaign that it started since October of the last year against the Palestinian people, mainly in Gaza, leading the whole region to a state of turmoil and a state of instability. And this is what the Zionist regime Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been working to reach, as he refused to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and continued the genocidal campaign, killing more than 33,000 Palestinians, 70% of them are children and women, and injuring more than 75,000 others. At the same time, he has also military operations into the Lebanese territories, in addition to the last attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria, of course, crossing all the red lines vis-a-vis the international relations and the relationships among states. So Israel is responsible for that, and its leadership nowadays are working for more instability and more escalation in the whole region.
Mr. Usama, most neighboring countries closed their airspace and are high alert. Some of them even went as far to warn Iran against flying over their airspace. Is that a sort of a threat to Iran? What does this necessarily mean?
and its territory, and then such decision is up to that state, of course. But we need to understand the context of what's happening tonight. As Israel has been murdering the Palestinian people, the Zionist regime, as I said, killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, and the Palestinians are not aliens on this planet. The Palestinians are Arabs, Muslims, and the Christians, and they have the right to protection, and they have the right to ask their Arab brethren, the Arab states, the Arab countries around Palestine, to support them, to press Israel to stop its genocidal campaign against them, because it's implausible really to see the Palestinian children being killed and torn into pieces. It's implausible to see the Palestinian cities in Gaza being leveled to the ground, while the Arab states around Palestine are just watching. And in the best case, they condemn Israeli Zionist regime attacks on the Palestinians, but they take no action to stop that. So really, when they decide to intercept the Iran's missiles falling on Israel, that is really weird, and it really hurts the Palestinians and all the Arabs who believe in the justice of the Palestinian cause and in the fact that the Palestinian people deserve support and deserve advocacy, whether from Iran or any other country. Whoever asked Israel to stop its genocide, regardless of the way that he or she uses, that is in favor of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. And so not to protest the Israeli war that has been taking place for more than 6 months is really shameful. But when it comes to Iran's attack on Israel, to say we reject that and we are going to intercept that. So this is not acceptable, of course.
We will be, we will talk about the condemnation and this in a minute. I want to ask Mr. Arij Al-Koukash about his opinion and his comment about the fact that most countries close their airspace and that they're on high alert as well.
الو هل يسمعني أحد؟
Are you with us, Mr. Arij?
الو هل يسمعني أحد؟
Are you with us? Okay, looks like we're facing a little technical problem. Iran's embassy was attacked about a week ago, and 7 of its high military officials were killed, but no Western country condemned the attack, and now they're condemning Iran's retaliation. Don't you think that this is some sort of a double standard? Usama Azzal, are you still with us?
Yes.
We were speaking about this.
Yeah, of course, not only the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate that was condemned by the Western countries and many other governments really around the world, but this is the double standard policy of these governments, and this shows how the world is lacking justice and objectivity really. Because when Israel kills people, whether in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, that is taken by the world governments as normal. But when it comes to any of the countries I mentioned defending itself and defending its people against the Zionist regime, then all the world stands on its foot and not only condemns. You must have heard of the last statements by the White House and the American president warning and threatening Iran of hitting Israel. So the American administration and the West in general is on the side of Israel by words and by action. And we heard also that many of the drones that Iran launched against Israel tonight were intercepted by the American defense system in the region and other countries. So this emphasizes again the view that the Western governments are not only condemning any attack against Israel in self-defense, but also they support Israel by words, by money, and this time by military means.
Speaking about this, the US and the British military aircrafts, they have downed some Iranian drones over the Iraq-Syria border areas. Should we expect Iran's allies to step in? You just mentioned that the US is the biggest supporter of Israel, but are we expecting some sort of support or stepping in by Iran's allies?
Really, it depends on the development of the situation. As far as we hear from different reports and different analysts, that this is going to be like a limited attack by Iran, but if it gets worse and if things develop, and we heard the statement by the president of Russia, Putin, that if it hits Iran, then Russia is going to intervene in favor of Iran. So I don't know how things are going to play out really, but it depends on the developments in the next 24 hours or 48 hours and how the Israeli, the Zionist regime responds to the Iranian attack this night is going to be. Are they going to hit Tehran, for example, the capital of Iran? Are we going to see casualties on both sides, or it's going to be a limited response and everything gets done just tonight?
Right. Mr. Arij Al-Kushash, I want to ask you again about the risk of an escalation in the region. Are we talking about a regional war? What is happening?
Good evening to you and to all the viewers. So we will see the statement of Iran, and if Israel so any response of Iran
بهذه الضربات ونذكر أن هذه هي أول مرة في التاريخ يتم ضرب من إيران إلى إسرائيل فهذه نقطة تحول بمجرد أن قررت إيران قصف إسرائيل تعتبر نقطة تحول في كل هذه المنطقة.
has decided to strike. So it's a turning point for the whole region. And the airspace of Lebanon has been closed until 9 in the morning.
أن المجال الجوي اللبناني قد توقف العمل به اليوم إلى ساعات الصباح حفاظا على سلامة المسافرين.
Do you think that the fact that neighboring countries of Iran have closed their airspace is some sort of threat to Iran, or what does this supposed to mean? What is this supposed to mean?
دون حفاظ على سلامة المواطنين من أي امتداد للقصف الإيراني في هذه الليلة التي تعتبر نقطة تحول. كما يمكننا أن نذكر أن في هذه الليلة أيضا تم قصف من الجبهة الجنوبية صواريخ باليستية إلى الجانب الفلسطيني المحتل ما يعرف بدولة إسرائيل اليوم، فهذه تعتبر مساندة ربما في هذه الساعات. وأيضا أيضا هناك فرضية أن بعض الدول أن إسرائيل تقوم بالرد لردع الاعتداء الإيراني، فتقوم بالرد بالمجالات الجوية الأردنية والسورية. وحتى هذه اللحظة تم اعتراض بعض الصواريخ، ما يقارب 100 صاروخ بحسب التحليلات تم اعتراضهم في المجال الجوي
Looks like the
السوري والإيراني.
interpretation have stopped. We will have to move back to our other guests, and this allows me to ask you the question, will this conflict, will this escalation pave the way to a Putin-Biden confrontation, knowing that the US is Israel's biggest allies and Russia is Iran's ally?
According to a statement by the Israeli news channel called Channel 14, the cabinet ended its meeting now and decided to have like a very strong response to the Iranian attack, and this might show that there is going to be more escalation and more military attack and counter-attack between Iran and Israel. And if this happens, the American administration is going to step in, of course, in favor of the Zionist regime against Iran. Now, how would the Russian government and the Russian president respond? It depends, of course, but according to the statement that we heard from the Russian president, that he is going to be on the side of Iran. But at the same time, the Iranian intervention tonight shows that the balance of power in the Middle East is going through a big shift, because in the past, Israel used to hit the neighboring countries and to slaughter as many Palestinians as it pleases, without any intervention from any party. Today's attack by Iran could be a lesson not only to Israel, but also to its allies like the United States, Britain, Germany, and some other Western countries, that the language of war and hit back is not the solution for the situation in the Middle East, and this might push the American administration and the West further in order to work for a real and genuine peace in the region by forcing the Zionist regime to end its occupation of the Palestinian territories and apply the United Nations resolutions vis-a-vis the Palestinian cause. So once again, how things are going to play out is really vague, but what Iran did tonight is a big lesson to Israel, to the West, and at the same time to the neighboring countries here, as allowing Israel to behave as a state above the law all the time and to flex its muscles at not only the Palestinians, but also Lebanon, Syria, and other neighbors. This would not be durable, and it would keep the whole situation in the region like perilous and dangerous. So it depends on how the West is going to read the story that Iran delivered to the world tonight.
The U.S. State Department moved assets to the Middle East region just in case, as they said. In case of an intervention, in case of a broader and greater escalation, what type of heavy weaponry will the parties use if they will intervene? And my question especially is, are there any risks of a nuclear war in the Middle East?
Look, if the American administration now and the West understands the message well, that Israel's policy is dragging the whole Middle East to the abyss of fire and to wars that would claim the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and destroy a lot of cities here in this region. if the West understands the message and presses Israel to stop its aggression, first against the Palestinians and its occupation of the Palestinian land, and accept the terms of peace and reconciliation in the region, then the Middle East would avoid such scenario. But if the American administration and the West keeps misreading the message and giving Israel the green light to act as it pleases, and you must have heard today of the Israeli terrorist militias, the settlers, and their attacks against the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem, killing 3 Palestinians and injuring about 30. And until now, while we are speaking now, Israeli settlers are attacking Palestinians in the West Bank. If the West keeps a blind eye to that, I think that this is not the only round of war going to be, but we need to expect even the worst.
We need to expect even the worst. Are we expecting a third world war? What do you mean by the worst?
I mean by the worst that Israel is a belligerent state. It refuses even to have its borders or to identify and to have recognized borders. Israel believes in the language of power, in the language of war. It sees the Arab world as a weak, impoverished war that can't fight back and can't provide any support for the Palestinian people. It does not care about the stance of the Arab and Muslim world at all, and it enjoys all the support from the American administration, from other Western countries. If it doesn't change its mentality and its mindset, the situation will be worse in terms of more wars and more conflicts and more aggressions against the Palestinians and other countries in the region. It's not necessary to have a nuclear war because you know what's happening in Gaza today. The full destruction of the Palestinian cities in the Gaza Strip, Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Jabalia, and Middle Gaza, Gaza al-Wusta. Israel used more than a nuclear bomb, really, against Gaza, and the world is only watching. If the world keeps watching, of course, what's coming next is going to be more dangerous and much better. So to have not better, but to have a better situation, the world must impose on Israel to abide by the United Nations resolutions and world vision for peace in the region, and force it to end its wars, whether against the Palestinian people or against Lebanon or against Syria, and give a chance for peace, but not more for wars and for conflicts.
Right. Let me just go back to Mr. Usama Nazal, the manager in Palestine broadcast, who is joining us from Jenin-occupied Palestine. I'd like to ask you the question again about the risk of escalation. Mr. Arij, can we talk about a broader escalation?
If we need to talk إذا أردنا الحديث اليوم عن الرد الأمريكي
about the American response
على إيران فهناك
on
رسالة من
Iran.
الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
So there is a statement by the United States of America
إلى الجانب الإيراني مفادها إذا كان
that
الرد
was sent to Iran, providing for
فأمريكا لن تتدخل
the response of the United state, so not interference in Iranian issue. So it provides for all the measures and means to protect Israel. If the Iranian response, there wouldn't be a direct response on Iran, and this will put us in front of a problematic, because Iran put the ball or throw the ball into the court of Israel, because if it responds to Israel, it will be able actually to limit itself to this and not go beyond that. And allow me to recall that after 6 months of war, Gaza is for the first time ever clear of any warplanes.
So maybe you're saying that this is paving the way for a greater escalation and confrontation, perhaps a Putin-Biden confrontation, knowing that Israel or the US supports Israel and Russia is Iran's biggest ally.
Russia is the first supporter of Iran. However, so the region now is open to all possibilities, especially that the ball is in the court of Israel. We know Israel, and we know that Israel is a bloody entity that doesn't take anything into consideration, and we saw that the government of Netanyahu didn't take anything into consideration. If we limit the government of Netanyahu with this aggression and this strike from Iran, means that the region is open to war, and it's true that it's inevitable that the Russian side will not stand silent and will intervene and step in this conflict. If we want to link the things amongst themselves, it's undoubtedly, or it's undoubtful that Russia will interfere and step in, even though it's in a stalemate because of the war in Ukraine, and also what is expecting the US during the elections, and also the support that it provides for Israel. So we have many possibilities whether the US is continuing or will continue actually to support Israel and not listen to its people, because the people is claiming that the US stops funding and stops supporting Israel and its genocide, given that the money that is funneled to Israel is the money of the American citizens. So now it's the question that is being asked, because the court, as I said before, is in the court of, or the ball is in the court of Israel.
As you know, the drones that Iran attacked Israel have been intercepted by the British and by the US. But how come can Israel talk about attacking again and responding while it is the one who started attacking the Iranian consulate?
The Israeli armed forces managed, with the help of the British forces, to down over 100 of drones, especially in the region of Suwaida and Sham in Syria. So this response, and with this response that has been made by Iran today, is a turning point, as I said before. So this response, as much, and we don't know now what is the extent of this response, because these drones that were launched by Iran needs over 3 hours to reach the Israeli land. And now we don't have the visibility to see everything that will be happening, so we have to wait until early in the morning next day to see the possibilities and to see whether this military operation carried out by Iran is equal to the harm caused by Israel to Damascus, to its consulate in Damascus.
Mr. Mr. Arij al-Kushash, Israel has been already waging a war for 6 months now against Hamas. Does it have the human materials and human resources to conduct a war on 2 different fronts now, today?
إسرائيل تقاتل على الجبهات
is fighting on many fronts, not only on 2 fronts, but we have also the Syrian, the Lebanese fronts, and also its internal division and fighting because the government of Netanyahu is in troubles today. So it is waging a war and a genocidal war on our brothers in Palestine and in Gaza in particular. If we want to talk about the human resources and the military force of Israel, so this force is tightly and closely linked to the coverage that is being protecting, or that is protecting actually Israel. But in return, we want to see on a regional level that, or we see on the regional level that Israel is under economic trouble because the southern front impacted on the northern part of Israel, compelling it to import grains and foodstuffs. If we speak about the economy of Israel, it's collapsing every day more. If we speak about the Israeli military forces, so it's sustained a lot of human losses, and there is also a media censorship because we don't reveal this on the media. So let's go back to the first question. If the US support will continue, but I think that it won't continue, it will constitute a problem for Israel because Israel cannot sustain more days of war. But I don't think that it will continue to wage its role or its war without this support. But the Israeli side reveals that it intends to enter Rafah, the region of Rafah, and go back to Khan Yunis. And this has been on for almost a month now.
Usama Nazal, what is your comment?
Yes.
What is your comment? Yeah.
The question again.
Regarding the fact that Israel has been waging a war for about 6 months in Gaza, can it really have the means and human and material resources to wage a war elsewhere or on 2 completely different fronts?
Yeah, really, it is. When we talk about the Israeli occupation war on Gaza, we need to understand the situation of Gaza. Gaza is not a state. It is not a superpower, really. Gaza is a small Palestinian enclave that has been under the Israeli occupation from outside and under the Israeli siege since 2006, 2007. And it is one of the most overcrowded and most impoverished areas, maybe in the Middle East or in the world. So what's happening in Gaza is an Israeli occupation, aggression, and genocide campaign against the indigenous people of Gaza, the Palestinian people. So it is not a war between 2 sides or 2 states like what we see now between Iran and Israel. Now, concerning the resources and the Israeli occupation ability to open another front, whether against Iran or against Lebanon or Syria or any other party, Israel is not alone, really. Israel is fully supported by the American administration, and we all watched how America opened all its weapons warehouses to Israel, and they provided it with thousands and thousands of missiles and bombs and rockets and F-15 and F-35 warjets during the last 7 months. And the United States is ready to provide more and to be part of the war on side of Israel against Iran or any Arab and Muslim country. And we don't want to forget also the support from Germany and from Britain and from many other Western countries, in addition to the big problem that the Arab world is facing today, which is the normalization policy between some Arab regimes and the Israeli Zionist regime. So when we talk about a war of this type, we need to understand that Israel is fully dependent on its patrons, the Americans and some other Western countries.
Right. Protests in Israel are calling on Netanyahu to step down. They don't want him anymore in office. Do you think he will be able to manage and provide human resources, knowing that ultra-Orthodox threatens to immigrate if they're forced to enroll in the army because it goes against religion?
Yeah. Now the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing a domestic problem because of the policy of drafting the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi, to a certain point failed. And we know that this category of Israel can resist the decision of the government, and it is not easy for Netanyahu and his government to impose the drafting decision on them. And we know that there is a split now within the Israeli society itself between this group, the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, and the secular categories of the Israeli society. And at the same time, and before he started the genocide against Gaza, he was facing a problem with the judicial system in Israel, and we used to see demonstrators and protesters in thousands in different Israeli areas against his decision to have the judicial reform he called, and the protesters used to call the judicial coup d'etat in Israel. So yes, in addition to the corruption charges leveled against him by the Israeli judiciary. So he has a lot of problems, and that is why he is determined to continue the genocide against Gaza, to escalate more, and to expand also the war to have a full-fledged regional war with Iran and maybe other countries in the region. So the political life of Benjamin Netanyahu depends on his ability to extend the war against the Palestinians and other regional countries.
Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Usama. We're now joined by Mr. Hamoud Salhi, a political analyst joining us from the US. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Mr. Hamoud Salhi, Iran's Revolutionary Guard have launched dozens of drones and missiles against specific targets in Israel, but they have been intercepted. Some of them have been intercepted by Israel with the help of the US and the British forces. Do you think we are now going to witness a greater war in the region of the Middle East?
That's a possibility and a scenario that will most likely be reported and seen as a possibility. But I think neither party, neither the Iranians nor the Americans want to escalate this. This message is clear from the Iranians that they want to let Israel know that there are consequences to their actions. The Iranians know very well that drones will be stopped because of how the dome works. But at the same time, they don't want this to continue to a degree where it will lead to a regional conflict. They also want to send a signal to the United States, as has been reported, there was a secret agreement between the Iranians and the Americans not to expand the conflict of Gaza to other areas. The Americans, despite the fact that they acknowledged that they had nothing to do with this, and President Biden is on record for telling the Iranians not to retaliate, despite all of that, the Iranians want also the Americans to know that there are consequences to the Israeli actions, and they are ready to retaliate anytime and any way they want.
Right, so we are not expecting, in your opinion, more attacks or more actions from the Iranian part?
I think this is how it's going to be. The Iranians are very, very practical, very pragmatic. It all depends on how the Israelis would retaliate, would react to this latest, to the Iranians. If the Israelis are to retaliate and to escalate this, then the Iranians may take another approach, may look for other avenues to see to it that they got, justice, what they feel that this is the right thing to do. But at this point, it looks like, it's tick for tack. We're going to be on a break for a while, and assuming that Israel will not do anything.
So it all depends on Israel's reaction, despite the fact that it started the attacks. What do you think, Mr. Usama Nazal?
Yeah, of course. The Iranian mission in the United Nations stated that that is the Iranian response to Israel's attack on the Iranian embassy in Syria, and that's it. But the Israeli cabinet that ended its meeting about an hour or half an hour ago stated that the Israeli response to this attack is going to be like seismic and enormous. So it depends on how things are going to unfold tonight and tomorrow, and how Israel is going to respond to this Iranian response. If it hits Iran hard, and then Iran is going to be forced once again to react and respond. So things are going to escalate, and things could get out of control, and we could talk about a real regional war. But we can't make any judgment now. We need to see how Israel is going to respond. Is the United States going to allow Israel to respond hard, or the United States is going to ask Israel to digest the Iranian response and to end things at this point? So all that depends on how the Americans are going to behave.
It all depends. Back to you, Mr. Hamoud Salhi. Given these escalating tensions, what are the implications for regional stability and security?
So the first scenario, if we are to admit that the Israelis would not retaliate, that scenario is going to be a status quo that we have seen so far, that the Yemenis are going to attack, do what they are doing, that the Palestinian resistance will continue to fight until Israel is defeated and left Gaza. And then, we see what's happening in Lebanon. But if this thing escalated, then we have on record that the Iraqi resistance is also on record to move. It's about 12,000 claimed of its supporters to fight in Gaza. So this will be expand to other groups that have yet to be that sort of involved in this conflict. So in the end, I think Usama is correct. The United States has a say in this. And I don't think the United States wants to engage in another regional problem, particularly with the elections and with the way how Gaza has taken forefront in the electoral campaign. The United States at this point wants to de-escalate the situation, and it's its best interest to keep this at the level it is now. And but the scenario Israelis we have seen the Israelis might do things that they think it will benefit them to escalate the situation, because it will bring the United States into the conflict. And, any times Iran is attacked, the Western media seems to accept it as necessary, because of the belief that Iran is a threat to Western values, is a threat to stability in the region, which is, as we know, more propaganda than real.
Mr. Hamoud Salhi, Iran retaliated, and now Israel wants to attack back. So they will attack back, then Iran also vows to attack back if they also retaliate. Is this going to end in a war? Are they going to do it tit for tat? What are your expectations?
So I think there are two levels here. The first level is that the Iranians have spoken. And now I think the likelihood is that we are going to stop here. Nothing else will happen. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the Israelis attacking, the Iranian attacking, I think the second step is the Iranians will use their other ways to force Israel into sort of stopping from attacking them. I think Iran is very well prepared to engage its supporters in the region and make sure that Israel got the lesson. We might expect increased tensions in Lebanon with Hezbollah. We might expect also the range of attacks to reach areas inside Israel. And, so from my perspective, really, we are going to start seeing this to de-escalate more than escalate.
Right. Mr. Hamoud Salhi, another question. Experts, they are suggesting that the direct Iranian attack or the direct attack from Iranian soil would mark a significant departure from the country's record of restrained response to attacks. What's your take on that?
I think what we've seen in the last few days, number one, the Iranians have taken cautious in the past. Remember the killing of Soleiman. There were other killings, and in each case, the Iranians listened to the Americans, also taking steps to ensure that the Israelis understand that they have the power to attack, but they are going to restrain because they don't want to get into a regional conflict. I think this case was different. The Iranians felt that attacking their embassy and killing their people was a violation of their sovereignty, because it did happen in the embassy, and these are sovereign territories per the diplomatic law. The second thing is that the United States seemed to be, particularly the latest declaration by President Biden, who basically told the Iranians not to do it. And so they felt that the United States, instead of standing up and voicing concerns and making sure that Israel is held in its corner, they didn't do that, despite the fact that the Israelis continue to launch threats. And so the Iranians find themselves in a position where they have to respond. And by responding, the action that they take is actually well within their pragmatism, because they know that the way you sort of pass the dome is by launching several missiles, and the way they've done it appears to be sending a message that they can hit the Israelis from Iran, and but they want at the same time that their sovereignty is not undermined, and they will respond to any threats against their national interests.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamoud Salhi. You're a political analyst joining us from the US. Thank you also to Arij Al-Koukash, a journalist and political analyst from Lebanon, and Osama Nazal, manager in Palestine broadcast, was joining us from Jenin, occupied Palestine. Thank you very much for our viewers for following us until here. Take care and bye-bye. Back to our special program on Iran's retaliatory attacks against Israel after they killed 7 of their military officials in their embassy in Damascus. And we are joined today or tonight also by Mr. Hamoud Salhi. Are you here with us tonight, Mr. Hamoud Salhi, again? No, we are joined by Mr. Bouamama. Thank you very much for accepting our invite. Zohair Bouamama, are you with us?
مرحبا صباح الخير.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Bouamama. Israel is currently trapped in Gaza, and there is a potential regional war in the Middle East. Israel is stuck with no achievable objectives in Gaza. What do you think it is going to do next?
Of course, this is an important question. I believe that Israel is in a strategic problem. It doesn't have any way out of the strategic issue that is surrounding it in Gaza. And this is why it tries to find a way out from this strategic problem or trap. But the solution will be to go towards another attack on Rafah, or to drag the region to a regional conflict that will lead the dragging of the United States of America in an open war against Iran. Netanyahu, I believe, he thinks, along with the Zionist leaders, that this way out will bring things upside down, as we say, and for this he resorted to its attack against the Iranian consulate in Syria or on the Syrian land, and I believe that he thought or he believed that it would be, or he would be able to drag the Westerners and the Americans to an open regional war despite that Washington doesn't want. And I don't believe that it intends to get involved in what Netanyahu is thinking about. But Iran is today without or left without any choice. We said it a few days ago. It doesn't have any other choice than responding to what its consulate in on the Syrian territories or the Syrian borders has subjected to. So they want to preserve the deterrence power, because if they don't retaliate, it will be costly for Iran. So its reputation, its credibility towards its population inside the country and also its allies in the region, I don't believe that Iran intends to go toward or to get dragged into a regional, an open regional war that, as we saw and as we analyzed, they orchestrated this response gradually, which means that they don't want to fall into that trap and they don't want to get into confrontation and an open war that will lead Washington into this war or into the region. But as I said before, if they are obliged to, they will say that they are ready to get into this confrontation.
They do not want further escalation. Of course, all parties are trying to avoid greater war in the Middle East, but how do these Zionist actions fit within Israel's broader strategic objectives in the region as a whole?
كما قلت قبل قليل في حسابات الإيرانيين ما قاموا به قبل ساعات.
For Iranians, what they did a few hours ago is a response that they wanted to be tight, but there are undoubtedly many risks, even in the possibility of this response to be tight and not drag into a confrontation with Washington and also the allies of Tel Aviv, as Netanyahu wishes. I think that there are great risks and dangers about this Iranian vision that they believe it's an inevitable response, but it should be tight and well orchestrated not to fall into the trap that could have been set by Netanyahu to drag them into a confrontation with Washington. I believe that the repercussions and consequences will be serious and dramatic, and we can say that what happened tonight is a far sign of the confrontation between the two blocs and sides, between Iran and the Zionist entity, and with some sides as well, through its allies in the resistance axis, and to avoid that this confrontation spills over to other regions and gets to another level, global confrontation. So the Iranian response is marked tonight that it came from the Iranian land. It's the first time in the history of the conflict between the two regions, and it didn't come through Iranian allies that are known in the region. So it was clear-cut and it was apparent. The Iranian leadership claimed the operation and said it overtly and openly that they did this response in spite of the fact they've always been marked by ambiguity. So notice with me that the response of Iran today was a compound or a composed response, which means that it came from several geographic regions. It's signed by Iran and claimed by Iran, so there is no doubt about it. So Iranian struck this time and didn't do it through their allies in the region. And yesterday, Saturday, there was a seizure, a military seizure of a ship that belongs to the Zionist entity near the Hormuz Strait. And there is also this dynamic and this movement from the allies of Iran, particularly Hezbollah, with mortar shells and also missiles in the region of Al Jalil, east of the occupied Palestinian territories. This means that Israel Iran has used for the first time ever the tripartite allies to apply pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, and it was asked yesterday. So the move and the dynamic of their allies and their supporters in the region was confirmed. There was also other interventions by their allies in Syria and Iraq and other regions, and it's the first time that they strike with their own military forces and their drones directly from the Iranian land towards the occupied Palestinian territories, and I believe this constitutes, in my opinion, the difference and mix of what happened yesterday, a qualitative leap in the course of the confrontation between the two sides. I believe that the repercussions, and I'm going to answer your question, so repercussions will be based on the Iranian vision, based on two things. The first one is the nature of the Iranian response to the Israeli attack. So they said that it's the first step in their response, and they will base what will happen in the future on what Israel will do. And I believe that the entry or the non-entry of Washington in the game will be determinant to the response of Iran's response over the next hours, because we have already heard or we have learned of leaks that Washington warned that the intervention of any countries in the region that will strike the interests of Washington or the interest of Iran by Washington, or allowing allies of Washington to use their lands through their military bases spread over those countries and regions for any military operation against Iran will lead to a fierce response and the entry into another phase that will be stronger and more powerful on Israel and also on the interests of the US and even on some allies of the United States in the region. So I believe thus that we are ahead of decisive hours, and everybody is expecting what will happen in the future. I believe that some specific actions that were carried out through letters and communications between Israelis and Americans before this operation, providing for the response of Iran, and that the response of Iran will be tight and fierce, and any Israeli retaliatory action or any dragging of the United States into this conflict and to strike Iran will
get back to
change
this
the basis of this tight response and will probably lead to an open confrontation and conflict that will bring
we will get back to these points. You were saying, Mr. Zohair Bouamama, that Iran's retaliation was a clear message to Israel and perhaps to anyone who wants to attack its sovereignty, that it will retaliate and it will attack back, and that was a very qualitative leap forward. As you know, Mr. Bouamama, the US and British military aircrafts, they have downed Iranian drones over Iraq and Syria borders. Do you think think, in your opinion, that Iran's ally would perhaps step in just like the US is supporting Israel and other Western allies are supporting Israel?
أعتقد نعم كل طرف الآن
I believe that each side
في المنطقة
has its role in the region, and every side is aware of this position as it stands. The news that said that US and UK aircrafts that have been sent to intercept the drones launched by Iran, and also the missiles and drones launched by Lebanon and Syria. So as Biden said earlier, so the commitment of the United States to protecting and preserving the stability and peace of Israel is firm and unwavering, as he put it, even or despite all the barbaric aggressions perpetrated by Israel on the Palestinian territories. It couldn't happen without the backing and support of the support of the United States and the other allies. So as I said before, the United States are not likely to be dragged into what Netanyahu is planning to do. And as we knew, we learned and we followed over the last days, so there is a clear tension between Netanyahu and Biden. They are wanting a way out from this conflict. They believe so it will broaden the conflict area or conflict zone, as I said. So the entry of Israel into a broader conflict, also the dragging of the United States of America into problems that could not live up to, especially that it's ahead of presidential elections, and it has also presence in many regions of the world. It's not ready for any regional conflict or war in the region, because it knows that it won't be facing Iran alone, but there is a whole axis that is working and operating based on the theory of the union of the areas. So it was implemented by the Iranians, the Syrians and Iraqis with the Lebanon party in the south of Lebanon, and now it's turning or taking other dimensions with the entry of the main regional player, which is Iran. And through this attack that I believe the United States of America or the Americans understand that it's necessary, and it was inevitable for the Iranians for many considerations, but they meet with the leaders of Tehran in preserving the stability of the region, and not to drag the region into
Mr. Zohair, speaking about a
conflict that will
war
be
and looking ahead. Understood. Speaking about a regional war and a risk of escalation, and looking ahead, what are likely the short-term and long-term consequences of the current escalation for the stability and security of the Middle East, and how might these events shape the trajectory of the war in Gaza?
أعتقد أن هذا التصعيد الآن
I believe that this escalation now will push all the sides or all the parties to look seriously and apply more pressure on Netanyahu to find a solution through concluding a deal with the resistance to put an end to this aggression against Gaza. I believe that Israelis
تقديرهم أو تقدير الموقف الاستراتيجي حينما قرروا
when they decided to implement or to carry out their attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria, they probably believed that Iranians will observe, as we know, the strategic patience and won't respond, but their calculations were completely wrong this time. And this is And if it's proven that the Americans
ويتماشوا مع ما يريده نتنياهو من محاولة الدفع بالإدارة الأمريكية إلى الدخول
Netanyahu wants in dragging the United States in a conflict with Iran, and if they are informed, Netanyahu and the leaders of the occupation, that the Americans are not involved in that conflict and don't intend to strike against Iran, so there will be a change in the position and there will be...
Thank you very much, Mr. Zohair Bouamama. I'd like also to say thank you for Mr. Hamoud Sahi for joining us in this second segment. And I would also like to ask the same question to Mr. Hamoud Sahi about the long-term and short-term consequences of what happened today in Iran with Israel on the security of the Middle East and also on the war in Gaza.
We have to unpack those three things. The first one, what happened today, from my reading and what we've seen, the narrative that is being used, I think this is undone. For example, the Western media, including Reuters and others, are using the term retaliatory. They're saying that Iranian is retaliating, meaning they are giving justification to their action. The second thing, the American president met with his national security cabinet, and the statement that came out of that was really the usual statement. The United States will stand with Israel no matter what. The third thing, when you hear about the general, the Israelis have made statement the way they expect it to be making it. They met their cabinet, their general spoke, and basically talked about the event of today. So most likely, from what we're seeing, this is it. None of the parties that are involved in this latest episode of the war in Gaza and wants this to continue further. The Iranians have been very, very, very practical. They've done what they said they would done. They targeted the base from which the Israelis attacked Damascus, their embassy. So from that perspective, I think this is done. Now, what's going to happen to this? I think the trust that existed, or the implied agreement, or some of it, call it secret, between the United States and Iran, between the United States and Iran, that they do not expand this conflict. I think that trust is gone. The United States has to earn the Iranian respect from now on, meaning that the Iranians are now in a position where they have to think about their strategic depth, meaning that they are concerned about Israel's attacking them again, and also about the United States not doing much or nothing to stop the Israelis. So strategic depth for the Israelis, for the Iranians, means that get their supporters engaged in activities that would sort of protect their national interests. So most likely the war in Gaza, your third question, will continue. Does this impact what's happening in negotiations, impact Israel's position to withdraw from Gaza? It might, but the way it's presented, this was Iran-Israel event. And both are now in a position where, well, we did our part, we attacked, you retaliated, let's wait for the next step. Gaza will continue to be on the line, and that's a different area.
Right. So for tonight, it was just between Iran and Israel. But Mr. Hamoud Salhi, in light of the recent developments, how might the involvement of Hezbollah and the Golan and the reported rocket attacks on the Golan Heights further complicate the situation? What are the implications for Israel's security posture?
I think that's really an excellent question, because, and that's where the conflicts will sort of see a different turn. The Hezbollah has been very, very sort of pragmatic. They have been very calculating in their response to the Israeli attacks. And understandably, they did not want to give Israel justification to launch further escalation or to escalate the conflict by attacking more civilians in Lebanon and other areas. So they were very, very sort of pragmatic, and the way they respond and the way they use their weapon every time they show their strategic depth. I think that's where the events will happen. So you have Hezbollah on the one hand, but also you have the Iraqis who are close allies with the Iranians, and more so, they are big supporters of the resistance in Palestine. That should be expected to escalate, but it remains within the confine of those conflicts.
Going back perhaps to our main topic and the main issue for tonight, as you know, Iran retaliated after Israel attacked their embassy in Damascus. A number of Western leaders have condemned Iran's last retaliatory attacks. How do you think this last incident will widen the gap between the East and the West? We always see condemnation when it comes to Eastern countries, but not when it comes to Israel.
But again, it is expected. It is expected to always make Iran as an evil. The whole normalization that Israel engaged with some Arab countries was designed to make Iran the threat. So the Westerners, leaders, would continue to attack Iran out of fear that if they would be perceived as not standing with Israel. And look at what's happening. The Israelis have been doing, a genocide after genocide, killing how many thousands? I mean, we're talking about 34,000 or more killed in Gaza, and the Western world has done nothing. So it's expected now for the United States to come and say we stand by Israel. I mean, that's always been the thing there. And the Western leaders who are coming to condemn Iran should not have done that. But they know very well that they don't want to be seen as not supporting Israel. And we know that. But the Jewish lobby, whether it be in the United States or in Germany and other places, they play major roles. So it's hypocrisy in us all means. This was expected. And the Iranians did what they believed is in line with their strategic national interest. We all know their sovereignty was attacked, and we all know that the Iranians told us that they would retaliate. There was never a perception or any kind of response from the Israelis that, look, I'm sorry we did this, we are not going to do it again. Instead, the Israelis continue to launch threats after threats, and with the United States blessing. So from that perspective, I mean, what the Western leaders are saying is basically hypocrisy and not seeing what it is on the ground.
Mm-hmm. As a last question, Mr. Hamid Salhi, do you think that these events will impact the war in Gaza? What is happening, the genocide that is happening in Gaza? Does it have an impact on it? Is it totally separate from what happened, like you mentioned before? What's your opinion?
So let's think about this. 24 hours or before the Damascus, we're talking about the Security Council resolution. This is before Ramadan. The Israelis' refusal to abide by it. We were talking about the massacre of the kitchen, the famous and the killing. Kitchen. Yes, you have that. So Gaza was the center of the attention. What this event did is shifted the attention away from Gaza to a conflict that the Israelis feel will get international sympathy. And your example by pointing out that some Western leaders are doing this, this is exactly what the Israelis are wanting. They want to shift away from what's happening in Gaza. And by us, by the Western media focusing on it, they taken away their attention from what's happening in Gaza. And that's really the tragedy of all of this. This adds another layer to the conflict that Israelis are looking for to justify their actions and to bring the United States into this conflict and exonerate their behavior. And we are today, and I mean, you just examine or look at the media reports. Gaza is now on a third sort of topic of priority. So it's Iran, Israel, and then Gaza or anything else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamid Salhi, for accepting our invite, for bringing insights to All 24 News, and thank you, dear viewers, for following us up until here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was it for tonight's program. Thank you, dear viewers. See you in the next editions.